So, welcome, Russ and Emma from Evolution. Thanks for taking the time tonight to talk to us about the electric Range Rover conversion, which you are undertaking. I guess the first question has to be, why the Range Rover to convert?
Because it's cool, I guess, really, and iconic.
Yeah.
And look, I know you and I are probably on the same page with this, but if you're going to do any work to any vehicle, and especially if you're going to convert it to electric, it's it's got to be worth doing in the first place.
Mm.
You're not going to convert something or modify something like, I don't know, um, a mid 80s Ford hatchback or Mazda 3 or 323 or whatever. Those aren't, no one's going to care about those so much, but it's got to be something cool. And for me, there's nothing cooler than a two-door Range Rover, if I'm perfectly honest.
Mm.
The two-door Range Rover, it's already got a cult following. The and it's a great shape. It's as simple as that. And I think what's remarkable about that vehicle is that it was obviously the beginning of the whole SUV or 4x4. Sorry, Robert, I do apologise. Um, uh, uh, Cult or what do you want to call it? The trend, and therefore it's a correct vehicle to be converting from that point of view, I reckon too.
Completely cool car then, and it's definitely something which is going to, I guess, probably appreciate in value. Is that part of the consideration then? When you do a conversion, do you think about what it might be worth 20, 30 years down the track, or I mean, why do you sort of focus on the coolness of it?
Look, I think the analogy I guess I like to use is you don't want to overcapitalize with the vehicle. Like these conversions are for the moment aren't cheap. They're coming down all the time. The battery because the battery's coming down. But the you've got it. There's absolutely no point in my opinion anyway converting something that has no appeal in the first place. And the analogy I've got for this is if you don't want to be overcapitalizing the vehicle, just like you don't want to be overcapitalizing a property. So pick a not so great suburb. You wouldn't be putting a swimming pool in, I don't know, insert suburb here. And it's the same goes with cars. You wouldn't be converting, a Mazda 3 or something like that, because you're not going to get the value out of it. It's not, and you won't get the appeal or the attention and the value certainly won't be there at the end of the conversion.
So when it's converted, what sort of capability are we looking at here? Would it have a range in the order of 50 kilometres, 500, somewhere in between that? And what do you anticipate the vehicle being used for? Obviously, it can move itself under electrical power, but what would you actually use it for?
So look, in this particular case, it's this is the vehicle that's going to be used for our partner company as a company vehicle for EV Up, which is our charging network. And it will be used for daily drives and promotional events and all that kind of stuff. But it will be a workhorse, and it will be designed. The design of it will be such that it will be replace one of the vehicles we've got now, which is an Outlander PHEV, which is an incredibly capable vehicle and reliable and all those kind of things. And ultimately, it'll be something that will replace that, but obviously be full electric. And look, in terms of range, we're putting a whole lot of batteries in this thing, and the anticipation is that we anticipate we'll get there'll be about 350 k's or thereabouts at highway speeds, but that's based on calculations and previous experience and the weights and all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, with the way we like to test range is we actually like to drive it. We don't do any of that, WLTP stuff. We'll end up driving, and once it's complete, we'll drive it with a tow truck, and drive it down to Mornington or wherever it's going to be, and then and wait until it runs out, and we'll say, okay, That's the range.
So the WLTP, that's the standardised range for electric vehicles,
Yeah.
not unlike the ADR 8102 fuel consumption there.
Mm.
How accurate in the real, if people are buying an EV, can they look at that and go, yes, that's realistic, or should they sort of revise it up or down a bit? What sort of guidance would you give people around that?
So when you're looking at when you're looking at range electric vehicles, the WLTP is probably the most accurate you can get at the moment. But the problem with electric vehicles is that, or certainly the batteries, is they vary massively depending on the temperature and driving styles. So so if you're driving at 110 on the freeway, you'll get a lot less than if you're driving around town. And it's actually the interesting thing about them when you compare to petrol vehicles is, petrol vehicles are they're most efficient at a steady, 110 k's an hour, and they're most inefficient in stop start traffic. It's the other way around with electric vehicles. So in answer to the question, is WLTP can only be taken as a guide, and you need to be talking to people who drive similarly to you, look on forums, all that kind of thing, to get a realistic opinion, and real life experience in terms of how far these things will go.
Okay. All right. So when you've got the Range Rover set up as a daily driver for around town, then how different in practice is it going to be in all the sort of tiny little realities of driving to a internal combustion engine vehicle? Emma, you've got a fair bit of experience with EVs. How different do you find a daily driving experience?
It's an education, as Russ says. It depends on driving style. That's how you get the most out of your EV. And one of the most common questions we get, through Evolution and EV Up is exactly that. How do I get the best range out of my EV? And obviously the first thing is, you're thinking about what you've got on in the cabin. So that might be air conditioning. The air conditioning can reduce your range, those sorts of things. But when this Range Rover is converted, essentially, I guess we're used to driving EVs now. It won't be any different to driving a brand new off the forecourt EV.
No.
Essentially,
Exactly.
We won't convert a vehicle that you then have to make allowances for, or compromise your driving or your daily travel for. So this vehicle has to be one that anyone can jump into and drive comfortably.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the battery capacity will be around 75 kilowatt hours, which is comparable to the modern Teslas, obviously, and modern Jaguar I-Pace and all those kind of type of vehicles. So it'll have a modern drivetrain, but with a classic interior. So for us, that's the perfect combination. In that, you're getting all of the reliability, but not all of the style, all the reliability of a modern vehicle, but all the style of a classic vehicle as well.
Having said all of that, Russ and I might butt heads on this later on, but I'm very much of the opinion that this car doesn't get a new paint job, because I really like the patina of the car. So I like the fact it shows its kind of, rough spots, and it has that personality and tells a bit of a story on the outside. Then when you get in and you get behind the wheel, it's essentially a new vehicle.
And that's the thing with vehicles like this. We've got a few of these coming through the shop now as well. And at the moment, my preference actually, I'm in agreement with them of what's happened today. You can put the note in your diary. I actually agree with them. Yeah. Today is the day. Yeah. 22nd of July to 2020. I actually agree with Emma, because originally we were going to spend a lot of money on the paint job, because it's going to be a corporate vehicle, going to events and all this kind of stuff. But there's a really the vehicle has a story to tell, and that's the other thing you get with classic vehicles converted to electric, or any classic vehicle, is that for a fact that it's had a life prior to coming to you. And we know that this vehicle, the chassis, has only got 70,000 kilometers on it. So despite being from 1976, it hasn't traveled that far. And we know that the vehicle was loved for a period of time in its life, and then it wasn't. And then it broke down, and then it was parked in the field,
Hmm.
and then we got it. And that's that. I mean, and you know, and it was actually when it and when we obtained it, when we bought it, it was actually about to be used as a parts car.
Yeah.
So, you know, in my opinion, we've essentially saved it, and there's nothing more endearing than having a vehicle, for me anyway, that has a story behind it, compared to if you buy something new off the forecourt, and the story is that you went into a showroom, you negotiated a deal, and you drive out with a Toyota Corolla.
Mm.
And there's nothing more, you know, I guess, boring than that, to be quite frank. You know, and well, it is. And look, and the other problem I see with a lot of electric vehicles is they're technically brilliant, but there isn't a character. There isn't. And this goes with a lot of the modern vehicles at the moment, anyway. And you look back to like the mid 2000s, and for me, that's when the character, the original character of the vehicle has started to stop. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching or listening to this now will say, okay, yeah, I remember, I don't know, an Audi S4 from 2001, or you know, that kind of thing, or the E46 M3, or you know, I really love my D2, or whatever it is, and those kind of vehicles, and it's all those kind of vehicles have a real they have a place in a lot of people's a place in a lot of people's hearts. The only problem with them is that they're not always reliable.
And look, I think that's an interesting conversation, which is, do you take away the purity of something like this by converting it to electric drive? And some people would say yes, some people would say no, some people it's different, but whatever it is, I mean, it's done, and it's not going to have that V8 rumble. You're not going to change gears in the same way, but it will still have the fundamental ethos of an old Range Rover. I think that debate will just rage and rage. What's your view?
Look, I think there's a bit about, with this particular Range Rover, we're retaining the original gearbox and the transfer case, so you still get that character, you still get the sounds of the original Range Rover, and obviously you don't get the V8 rumble, but you get a heap more performance though. So for me it's a win-win from that perspective. If you remove all of that drivetrain, then yes, you miss out on a lot of the noise. But we're not doing that. We're retaining all of that mechanical capability, which is what, you know, a lot of Range Rover and Land Rover people want, right? They don't want to lose that kind of practicality of the
exactly. All right. Well, that brings us to our first question then, from someone called Galaxy A70. His parents must have had an interesting.
That's a great name.
It's a great name. Okay, so welcome, Mr. A70. So here's the question: are you using one motor, or are you going to have a motor for the front and one for the back? Now we know where we got that from, because that's a Tesla thing to have a motor at the front and a motor at the back. But let's take that question a bit wider. Talk us through the drivetrain and the propulsion systems and the transmission and so forth, and why you're making the choices you are there.
Look, there's a couple of options we're looking at the moment. So roll back. So we're actually we're using what's called a Hyper 9 motor to drive the original gearbox through an adapter plate, and then obviously it then connects to the transfer case and goes off to the rest of the axle. So it's one motor at the moment.
Okay.
And the reason we're using that is because right now there's enough power that motor will pretty much double the amount of torque that the current motor is putting out, and I think you get about 20% increase on the power as well. So
let me stop you there. If you're doubling the amount of torque, then that's a significant extra stress on the driveline. How are you going to handle that? Because the driveline may not survive it. Are you going to just put some form of torque metering system on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So look, we can dial that down, and we can soften the curve, which is what we'll do. But we're pretty confident that the driveline will be able to, with those treatments, be able to handle that fairly conveniently and efficiently. So that's the plan with this particular vehicle. There's another build we've got in the works where we're actually going to use Tesla driveline in a north-south arrangement. So basically, get rid of the whole gearbox and just have the Tesla drive unit in the middle of the motor. And it's going to be interesting comparing the two. In terms of performance and personality and all of those kind of things as well. There's at the moment there's no real plans for us to use dual motors, quite simply because we don't think there's a need for what we're doing. And to be quite frank, once you get over a certain amount of power and torque, then there becomes a whole lot of engineering questions that need to be answered and dealt with, and so it's a case of making it better but not so good that you've got to upgrade the brakes and suspension and all of that kind of stuff as well. So there's an equilibrium that you've got to maintain with these things.
Yeah, I guess from Tesla's point of view, they're doing a ground up EV build, so they probably didn't want a drive shaft going all the way from the front to the back or back to the front or whatever.
Correct.
Just easy just to put two motors in there. Whereas with this car, you've already got the drive shaft going from front to rear. So there's kind of not a lot of point putting in a second motor at the back, because then you'd have to fundamentally re-engineer it all and then make sure the front motor is synced with the front one and everything else. So yeah. So just to recap, then basically what you're doing, you're pulling out the internal combustion engine and just at the front of the transfer case, basically just hooking up an electric motor instead, and then the transfer case, transmission, gears, all of that is the same. The only difference is what's turning that input shaft is electric, not petrol.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
So I guess ripping out the petrol engine is probably a lot of fun, and you get rid of a lot of weight that way. And then the electric motor is, I'm guessing, physically smaller than the petrol engine, so that should go and just got to fabricate up some engine mounts. I'm also guessing that the engine mount fabrication might be a bit easier because it's smaller, lighter, and then it also doesn't vibrate either, does it?
Correct. And look, it's smaller, like the size of an office dustbin. If anyone's been in an office recently, remembers what that's like. No, obviously. And then also it's about 50 kilos as opposed to 150, 200 kilos for the motor. So it's really it's almost you almost don't need an engine hoist to put it in. I mean, you do because of OH&S reasons, but 50 kilos, a couple of guys can manhandle that pretty easily.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. The only thing we need to consider when we're fabbing everything up is the rotational torque is pretty high. So the mounts that obviously the motor uses it's got to be pretty much it's got to be as robust as it can be to avoid it twisting off the chassis essentially.
Is heat management a concern for the motor, because you don't want to get it too cold, I guess, or too warm? I mean, what's the considerations around that?
Yeah, so these motors they're actually air cooled, so there's no, as long as there's reasonable ventilation around them, then they're pretty much okay. And the good thing about these motors, they're actually sealed as well. Okay. So there's no issue around water ingress or anything like that at all. So it's pretty good from that point of view.
Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so you just get the motor there. Only weighs 50 kilos. It's a lot smaller. Lots of space in the engine bay. Nothing too much to worry about heating management. So relatively simple. But then that brings us to the power. So you've got batteries, and they are big and heavy. So what's your thinking around batteries? You obviously can't just pull the fuel tank out, or I suppose you could just pull the fuel tank out and replace it with a battery, but you probably want to do something a bit more sophisticated than that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So look, we use lithium-ion cells as most builders do, and the way the technology is going at the moment is that the weight of the batteries has come down significantly. In other words, the battery density, the power density has improved significantly. And we did a show and tell a couple of months ago in our shop where we had cells that were being used in the Mitsubishi i-MiEV in 2012 12, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then another group of cells which you used in the Outlander, and then obviously then the Tesla cells that we have used in vehicles previously as well. And the difference is just stark, that for the same amount, the same area and the similar weight, the amount of power is essentially quadrupled in the last few years.
Okay.
So, and it's significant. It's the difference between literally having 4 times the amount of range than you would have, or power, or as you would have had like a few years ago. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah. Do you see that battery technology improvement? I mean, you may have heard of Moore's law for computer CPUs, doubling in power every 4 years or something like that. Have you seen that over the last few years of battery technology, and do you anticipate battery technology getting better and better?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and look, there's the new type of cell that Tesla is now using for their Model 3, which is significantly lighter and energy dense. But I think what we're going to see more of is that the cost more than the density is going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already seeing, I mean, some of the conversions we've seen, from 8 years ago, it would have been, $30,000-$40,000 for a battery pack of ordinary quality, of ordinary density, and pretty heavy weight as well.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's pretty much half that now, or sometimes even less for Tesla cells or Calb cells or LG Chem cells, where there are a lot. The density is better, but the cost is far better. So for example, I think around $10,000 to $12,000, you can get a pack which will give an average car around 150 to 200 k's range. So it's actually pretty. I mean, you still got to put it in a pack. It's still got to put a box around it and make it secure and all those kind of things. But in terms of the raw material, the cost of it's come down significantly. So yeah, look, I think it's more cost than density or energy density, I think, ultimately.
All right, so I can summarise that. We can look forwards to cheaper batteries and more powerful batteries as time goes on there, which is great. All right, good. Now I've got another question here. Will the Range Rover keep its towing capability, which is, I think, 3.5 tons for a classic?
Yeah, easy.
Okay.
Simple as that. Yeah, absolutely no problem at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
right, there you go.
And we're leaving the tow bar on, and that look, the intent with the vehicle, it's going to be completely versatile. It will do everything that the Outlander will do at the moment, essentially, plus more, obviously.
Yeah, well, the Outlander won't tow 3.5 tons.
I know.
All right, so a question for Emma then. Once you've got this vehicle up and running, and you can say, look, we can now convert Range Rovers, then who do you see buying it and using it? Give us some of the use cases for these people, and we say, well, so the person X would do this, who are your customers going to be for this sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's amazing. Obviously, we get a lot of inquiry, and we have a lot of people, come down to the workshop, or before COVID, and we've got everyone from people that want to convert a small hatchback right through to speedboats. We've got this wide range of kind of customer inquiry. I don't think there's really a one size fits all with this, but I do see two markets. I see the classic vehicle modification market. So essentially what people do now, they spend a lot of money on the classic vehicle that they've had for years and they love. And then we're also looking to the future, how, will we reach a point in the EV sector where when we reach the point of price parity, so when EVs become, affordable, will there be a subset of petrol vehicles, for instance, that get leapfrogged by electric vehools? And
what do you mean by that?
So I'll give you an example. In France, there are 360,000 Renaults. I don't know the model, but 360,000 Renaults that are petrol, and they can't sell because EVs there's a greater uptake. The market's sort of, in Europe, of course, EV uptake is much greater than Australia. So Renault are actually talking with the French government and a retrofit peak body in France with the idea of retrofitting 360,000 Renaults to turn them into electric vehicles, essentially. So that's where we've kind of got our eye on as well. It's not just about high-end, high-cost, you know, one-off classic vehicles. Is there actually a market in future for doing at-scale conversions, but still producing a relatively family budget-friendly electric vehicle?
Yeah, okay, because I guess from my perspective at the moment, no EV on the market, and including conversion, makes economic sense in as much that you know, you'd pay X amount of dollars and you'd get it back. The maths doesn't stack up, and it will in future, but it doesn't at the moment. So
I actually disagree. I actually disagree with that, to be honest with you. I'm sorry to
go on.
interrupt. No, no. Like obviously, it's for me, it's total cost of ownership, and also think about when the iPhone came out. No one knew they wanted one until they got hold of one and said, "Oh, this is really cool. I want one of those." And we've seen people come through our shop, and you know, I'm sure we're not the only ones, the only individuals who've given, you know, handed the keys to a Nissan Leaf or the Outlander have gone, this is just amazing. And then it doesn't have to have price parity for people to realize that they want one ultimately.
But I'm not talking about wanting one. I'm talking about a hard economic consideration here. So, for example, I tested a Hyundai Kona. That's a $55,000, $60,000 car versus a $30,000 petrol car. And you'd have to drive that to the moon and back 2 or 3 times to get anywhere near price parity here. So at the moment, from what I'm seeing, is that an electric car is still I want one, as opposed to it's going to save me money option.
But it's not all about saving money, though.
I know it's not. I know it's not.
So it's not about saving money, and ultimately you can even go down to the at every price point, like a $20,000 Leaf, for example. You know, the one that we run is a first gen 2012. It's still worth $20,000 today, which is crazy for a 2012 car. But the truth is, when you buy a Nissan Leaf, for example, and I know there's going to be a lot of haters on here around, you know, that don't like the Nissan Leaf because they think it's a bit funny looking and all that kind of thing. Just throw a set of mags on it, it'll be fine, I promise you. But the thing is, once you've driven it, and then you appreciate the fact that it's completely carefree motoring, which is what a classic conversion does as well for you. Then I mean, it's funny, but we had a show and tell, like I said, a couple months ago, and someone said, "Oh, can I have a look under the bonnet of the Leaf?" And I didn't know how to get into the bonnet because I hadn't opened the bonnet since I'd bought the bloody thing. So whereas back in the day, like 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was, I had an Audi Allroad, and every time I went to a service, it was like, well, is this what's going to be now? What have I got to spend? What have I got to spend on? You know, and it was always $2,000. And I remember one time I went into the independent shop to pick it up, and my bill was again $2,000. And the guy was on the phone. The reception guy was. It was a point in the day when he was going to ring all the customers to tell them how much their car was going to cost, and there wasn't one that was under $1,000 in terms of repair, because it was, oh yeah, well, it started to leak from this and it's got a week from there, and you know, all of this kind of stuff. And it's just, there's nothing more refreshing than having a car that you don't actually have to worry about. That you don't. I mean, I know some people enjoy having to tinker and make repairs, but there's a I'll tell you how the difference is between owning that Leaf and saying the Audi is that I don't have to think about selling it anytime soon. Because
look,
I don't, right?
I take your point. I'm not sure I'd compare a Nissan Leaf with an Audi Allroad, but different cars. But I do take your point.
Come down and have a go. See how fun. Yeah.
Now, look, we're going to have to agree to disagree about the economics of it. But what I do think there is an economic argument for is if you wanted an old classic Range Rover there's no new ones, but if you wanted a classic Range Rover to drive around in, then you could make the argument that having converted it, then there's very little maintenance thereafter.
Correct.
And you could just leave it for a while and start it up again and go. And you could certainly start to perhaps construct an economic argument on that basis there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think you're right, and look, again, it's not about economics. It's about no one thought that spending $700 on a phone was a good idea like a few years ago, and now they're more like $2,000 because people just want them, and the convenience and all of that kind of so
yeah.
And also from our point of view, it's not just about the conversion. We're not this vehicle isn't. It'll be rough on the outside because it tells a story, but it's going to be absolutely gorgeous inside.
Yeah.
So we're going for a full retrim, reverse camera, reverse sensors. All of those, all the modern conveniences of a modern vehicle. And the thing is, Robert, it'll still cost less than a Jaguar I-Pace by a country mile, obviously.
Okay. Well,
so you know what I mean. So that's where we're comparing.
Yeah,
That's what we're comparing with.
Yeah. All right. So we've got another question here, and this should be an easy one. The question is, will it have regenerative braking? But let's expand it out a bit into what the braking system is and how that works on EVs.
Sure. So the beautiful thing about electric vehicles, if you pick the right motor system, is that when you're not on the gas, so to speak, or restart, or whatever you want to call it, basically the motor will convert, is capable of putting power back into the batteries. And the way it works is it actually energizes the coils just a little bit, and then the controller will then scavenge the power or the kinetic energy and put that into the batteries. And that can be turned up depending on how much power you put through the coils. You can manage the severity of the regenerative. So it can be very light in some cars, and then in others it can be quite strong. And on the Outlander, you've got pedals to actually change that, which is really cool.
Okay.
What that means is that, obviously, practically speaking, when you're driving, if you're in town in stop start, then you can just take your foot off the accelerator, and it will essentially come to a start, and it will scavenge all of that energy rather than converting the energy to heat with brake pads going on the discs or the drums. If you've got a car of that age, then it will basically put all that energy into the battery, which is just and obviously petrol cars can't do that because they can't really instigate a world death event.
Well, they don't have anywhere to store the energy.
They can't crush a whole lot of dinosaurs and convert them to oil and then go the refining process. Transport it from Saudi Arabia, put into your petrol station, all that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the answer is that Range Rover has a new set of pads, rotors. The brake system's gone completely overhauled, but because it's going to use regenerative braking, those pads and rotors are going to last a long time, and that's one of the small little advantages you get when you run an EV. Your brakes just basically never ever wear out. Now,
Correct.
We've got another question here. It's from Mr. A70 again. I might chuck this towards Emma for a first one there, which is how much the conversion will cost. And I think we should split that into two, because if you are going to take on something like the Range Rover, then you've obviously got the restoration cost, and that is a bit of how long of a piece of string, and then you've got the conversion cost. So let's put aside the restoration cost, because that's not really what we're talking here, and let's say that a vehicle is restored or in a perfectly good state, and it's wheeled into your workshop with an amount of money sitting in a bucket, and then you take that amount of money and you give it back. I mean, approximately what sort of money would that be, and what would be some of the considerations?
Yeah, look, it is the how long's a piece of string question, and we like to understand. We go through potential conversion owners, with a full list of what are your requirements. We want to understand exactly what it is you're after, starting with range, because that's always the big one. But do you want heated seats, yada yada yada. But the look, if we're just going with a ballpark figure, you're looking at around $50,000 for us to do it for you in your in our workshop. However, if you were DIYing, which is pretty common around Australia, we were chatting to a guy a couple of weeks ago who did an MGF, 20-year-old MGF for $15,000.
Right.
So there's a wide range, but essentially for us to do it for you professionally, it's a commercial, repeatable conversion process.
Okay.
And
just to be clear, for that, you basically get given the keys to a road legal, fully compliant, ready to go EV. Right.
Drive in, drive out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, that's fine. As long as everyone appreciates just the ballpark. But basically, if you're thinking about doing this, it's not at the point where it's a $5,000 or four-figure conversion. That's the sort of money you're looking at. If that's not worrying you, then yeah, I guess have a look at it. But we can expect that to go down over time, can't we?
Yeah, look, that's the plan with this as well. We're looking to democratize everything that we do is designed to be repeatable, not just from a business perspective, but also from obviously because we don't want to be reinventing the wheel every single time a car comes in. And to be honest, there's clients or prospective clients that come to us and say, I'm looking to convert this car to electric, and there are times when we say no because there's no real market for that vehicle in the future to be, or there might be just a really small, even just a small amount in Australia, and and there may not be the interest in that either. So we'll typically look to see if the vehicle is even worth putting our effort into in terms of converting in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it's the 50K is a really good ballpark figure around when it comes to these kind of things. But the intent is to bring the price down ultimately.
Do you see yourself or see Evolution Marketing Kit saying, okay, we have a kit for a Range Rover, and here's the motor, here's whatever else, and here's the instructions, go to it?
No.
Look,
the way this is from our point of view, the idea of this being a kit that anyone can pull together, that anyone can do, is something I'd shy away from, just simply because we've got a team of 6 people who perform the conversions for us that are on the Evolution team, and it's an ensemble of skills such as obviously a trained mechanic, electronic engineer, electrical engineer, a fabricator, and so on and so forth. And it's rare that you get anyone that can actually do all those skills in one go without a significant amount of learning. So we sell all the components that will allow or enable anyone to convert a Range Rover, Land Rover, and Beetle to electric at the moment. But we won't call them kits, if you know what I mean, because kits suggest you start at step 1, end at step 30, and then you've got an electric car converted. And there are there's a heap of caveats that and prerequisites and skills required to be able to do that. And some guys and girls will probably be very capable of doing that, but we don't really want to be calling the
that's understandable.
calling out kits, if you know what I mean. So yeah. All
right, cool. All right, so when you are designing, let's go back to the conversion of this Range Rover then. So we talked about the motor being fairly straightforward. All you've got to do is really the torque. In fact, it's simpler than a petrol engine for this reason. Then you've got those batteries. Now, I know that the batteries are bulky and they weigh a lot, but you do have the option to put them pretty much anywhere.
Anywhere you like.
A car where you've really only got one place you generally don't have too many different fuel tanks. So what's your considerations about where those batteries go? Weight, distribution, that sort of thing, safety?
Yeah, look, look, there's a number of considerations. Some of those are actually driven by the ADR rules anyway.
Yeah.
So, for example, they've got to withstand, penetration and also up to 20 G lateral movement as well. So and obviously the more batteries you have in one location, then that becomes more of a 20G times or however many kilos in one location is pretty significant, obviously. So look, the way you're very right. With batteries, it gives us the option to put them in multiple locations, provided we choose the right cells in the first place. So we like to use a smaller. I know the trend at the moment is to use Tesla packs, which are, a reasonable size because they fit the skateboard of the Tesla Model S obviously perfectly well, but they can be a real pain to put into into a converted electric vehicle because they're quite bulky and I think they're approaching like 700 or 800 mil wide. So there's actually quite, you can get them in the engine bay pretty well, but anywhere else it can be a bit of a tough ask. So what we like to do is we like to use smaller cells that we can break up into smaller numbers and then put them in suitable locations around the vehicle. And what that also allows us to do is, like you say, put the weight exactly where we want it to be. And look, the Land Rover certainly and the Audis that we've converted, the difference in the weight distribution has just been staggering. I'll be honest with you, it's just amazing. Because
in what way?
Because you're getting true 50-50 weight distribution, right. and the Audi in particular, that was a front wheel drive car, so all the weight at the front, so didn't handle particularly well, not in my opinion anyway. And then as soon as we convert to electric, we're able to put the batteries in the front, in the spine, and in the rear, low down. And the difference in how it handles now is it's night and day compared to how the car handled previously.
That's actually an interesting point, because when I've done EV testing, and certainly when I've been towing heavy trailers, weight distribution is actually more important than overall weight to a great degree. And I think you said earlier that the total increase in weight is only going to be around about 10%. But if you can get that better distributed, then you're going to have a better handling vehicle. And obviously with the batteries, you can put it between the front and rear axle easily. And you don't need to put it right at the back. I mean, the fuel tank on the Range Rover is behind the rear axle, worst possible place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dynamics. And the engine's right at the front, also worst possible place from dynamics. So yeah, big advantages there as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're working really hard with our engineer and our fabricator, and we've got just the right spots in terms of where to put these. So we're expecting really good things out of the vehicle once it's converted, just like we did with the Land Rover as well. So yeah.
So I have a question for you. What are the top questions people have about EVs and their top concerns, and how do you see them change over time?
Can I just answer one question? Just one.
Yeah.
What happens when the battery runs out? I'll let you go, Emma. I love that every time. Sorry. Go, Emma.
We'll run with that one first.
Yeah, it's we're very fond of saying that when you buy an electric vehicle, you're not just a driver, you're an educator as well. Look, in terms of questions, it's interesting for obvious reasons. I talk to a lot of women about electric vehicles, and women's concerns about them are very different to men's.
Oh, really? Okay, well, do tell.
Yeah, so women will ask questions like, if I'm sitting on top of a big battery, can I get cancer? Or if I drive through a big puddle, will the batteries explode? Because they've potentially seen videos of, there was an Outlander that was submerged in salt water that caught fire last year. And I was plugging my car into a charging station in Geelong a little while back with a friend. We were out for the day, and she looked at the charging station and said, "Oh, I couldn't touch that. That looks terrifying. I don't want to know. It's high voltage. It scares me." Whereas, and of course, range. Women are worried about range, but women are also worried about, can I fit 2 car seats along the back seats? Yeah. Can I fit my kids' school bags in the boot? Because again, traditionally EVs have been fairly small vehicles. So the concerns and the concerns are very different. I guess, you know, as Russ said, for men, it's about range. For everybody, it's about charging. How do I charge? What cables do I need? And of course, we've still got, with EV charging, we've still got this kind of situation of Apple and Samsung. We've got different types of plugs, and, you know, this charge station, you'll need an adapter like this, and for that one, you'll need a different cable, and it's still a bit confused. So it looks that, there's... I try to write down the frequently asked questions as we get asked them, and the list is quite long.
You said that women are mainly worried about, so women are worried about things, and men worried about things as to the same degree, or do they have a different attitude?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, as I say, men talk about range, and like, I've never heard a woman say, you know, if you convert an old Range Rover, do you lose the purity of it? As you talked about before, I'm not sure women are really concerned about that kind of thing. So I guess that's more of a bloke question. But interestingly, we're friendly with a group called Safescape, who make a electric ute for underground mining. Yeah. And they were saying, of course, you can imagine a mine site, male dominated. They used to their diesel utes, and they encountered a lot of resistance. But when they got the workers on these mine sites into this new ute, this electric ute, and they got it out on the road, they said after about half an hour they were kind of getting it. After an hour they could almost set the clock by it. After an hour driving it, giving it a bit of a rev down, sort of roads, and really kind of spanking it down some of the roads, and then plugging it in and charging it up for the first time. Yeah. After an hour, they were sold. They didn't want to go back to diesel. So
that's fantastic. Well, yeah. We'll take one last question and wrap up. That's from Frank Manders. What cells are you using? Prismatic, pouch, or cylindrical?
Prismatic.
Prismatic. There you go. So that's...
Can I answer?
Sure.
Just on that, what a we talked about men and women, and obviously there's a difference.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently so. I learned that in biology, but I'm still learning now. Apparently, in the realms of EVs.
Okay. Moving back onto EVs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But there's the interesting, one of the most interesting things I've seen in the last few months are people, both men and women, mostly men actually, shopping on electric cars based on range and range alone. And there's more to life than range. That I know at least 2 customers of ours who bought, and I'm not going to mention the car, maybe I will. They bought the car and then realised it doesn't meet their needs.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been a cheap car. It's been $70,000.
Okay.
Actually, I will mention the car. One was a Hyundai Kona, and the other one was a Tesla Model 3. Where they bought the car, and they go, how much is the range? And they say, it's 400 Ks or whatever it is. Perfect, that meets my range, meets my requirements. I want to get one of those. And they spent the $60,000-$70,000 on the car and realised that they can't get their shopping in the boot, or won't tow a trailer, and isn't a hatchback in the case of the Model 3. All of those kind of things. And I find it fascinating that just because of the electric, that there's an obsession with range when really it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be. The truth is that, and I think people are embarrassed about it. That the truth is people don't actually drive that far most of the time. Even though we're in Australia, we don't. Load up the Kingswood and drive across the Nullarbor every weekend. We don't do that anymore, really, especially now, obviously.
Exactly. All right. Okay, look, we've been going for a while, so we'll wrap it up there. So thank you for everyone that tuned in there. We are going to put this video on YouTube and send a link round to it. There will be further webinars there. So Frank Manders, you'll get your question answered as to why. We don't have time for it now, but we'll answer that in the next one for you as well. Russ and Emma, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. And you can read my articles about this on motofomo.com.au. Follow me on Facebook, and also follow Evolution on Facebook and the other social medias and their website as well. So thanks so much for attending, guys, and we will see you online soon.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.